Welcome back, everybody. We have our next video, A New Era in Foreign Policy. This is part one of two parts. A few vocabulary words for the day. Be sure to read through those to understand before moving on. Let's get things started with the continued conservative momentum that was building throughout the 1980s. Ronald Reagan was president, and then his vice president, George H.W. Bush, will take the presidency in 1988. Moving on from that, though, there was in China, there is some pro democracy movement. We saw at the end of the Cold War in the last video a lot of the fall of communism in many Eastern European nations. Now we see pro democratic movements in communist China, which is highlighted by the Tiananmen Square massacre, in which there's a student led protest against the government, and the government uh, lashes back and ends up killing hundreds of protesters. Because of communism, because of the Cold War, the United States certainly has its eye and interest in what is happening in China. Meanwhile, in South Africa, for a long time, there had been a system in place. That system was known as the apartheid, which means apartness. What that system was a system of segregation that kept blacks and whites segregated in South Africa. It was a long process, a long fight to overturn that, and George H.W. Bush, along with President Bill Clinton, when it was time, um, encouraged South Africa to eliminate that. Eventually, South Africa does, and they hold their first free elections in 1994 when Nelson Mandela is voted in as the first South African Black president. This is another instance of the United States not so much being anti-communist, but showing that it is showing support for a country that is working toward democratic elections. Also, during the George H.W. Bush presidency, is really what is the first war in Iraq or dealing with Iraq. This war is in 1991, and it is called the Persian Gulf War. The background on it is Iraq invades another Middle Eastern country in the Middle East. That country is Kuwait. Saddam Hussein invaded the country for a couple of different reasons, but one of which is the oil deposits located in Kuwait. It's important to keep in mind at this point that the Cold War has come to an end by the time this incident occurs. And George H.W. Bush, therefore, is faced with the task of what to do in a new post Cold War world. Without hesitation, George H.W. Bush decides that that this is not okay, and he starts to build a coalition that and what the coalition is really about. It's to establish that countries in the Middle East are okay with the United States providing military help to kick Saddam Hussein and Iraq out of Kuwait. And this operation to do so becomes known as Operation Desert Storm. And this is the goal of the United States, is to remove Iraq and remove Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. It is nothing more than that. That matters later when we take a look at the Iraq War in the 21st century. It's a quick war, and ends before March in 1991, and it is successful. It is without question a successful campaign and successful foreign policy endeavor by President George H.W. Bush. One of the important aspects of this war and why the United States, why that coalition was so important to the United States, was because of access to launch an attack against Iraq. It relied on the United States um, having a place to attack from and begin Operation Desert Storm. What you should notice here is that one of the main countries involved in helping, or the main country without question, helping out and giving support to United States military is Saudi Arabia. When the 1992 election rolls around, the success in the Middle East does not translate into a new victory for H.W. Bush. Rather, Bill Clinton wins the presidency. A couple of interesting things to note. For starters, this election has a viable third party candidate in Ross Perot. It's not that Ross Perot is really has a great shot at winning the presidency, but like like examples from the past in U.S. history, when there is a successful third party candidate, it takes a lot of votes from a particular candidate. And in this case, Ross Perot takes votes away from George H.W. Bush, and that hurts his electoral count and aids Bill Clinton in winning the election. Ultimately, the economy was the big issue in the election, which hurt which hurt George H.W. Bush in the um, when the voting totals came in. The other important aspect regarding Clinton and his presidency or winning the election is Democrats had made a fundamental shift to the right to try and attract more conservative voters during this particular election. Reagan had served 2 terms, George H.W. Bush won, and in this election, Bill Clinton went more to the center, and as it says, it bridged the gap between Democrats and Republicans, and some voters went from the right actually went over to the left. Be sure to check out this infographic, but you'll notice that when it comes to the popular vote, Ross Perot took quite a few votes. And if we think about those votes as being votes that originally would have gone to George H.W. Bush, that matters quite a bit. Yes, Ross Perot did not take any electoral votes, but if those 19 million votes are divvied up, it could have changed some of the electoral count. That's it today. We'll see you next time.